it's John and Casey here from Are You Real? And we've been sleeping on my pillow now for over a month. And I'm telling you, our sleep has improved drastically. So what are you waiting for? When are you going to jump on board and start experiencing the kind of restorative sleep you need in your life? Are you waiting for a better offer? Well, your wait is over, because if you go to mypillow.com right now, you can take advantage of the MyPillow 4-pack offer, right, John?
That's right. You get 2 premium MyPillows and 2 to-go anywhere pillows at half off. Just go to mypillow.com, use my code REAL, and get 50% off. Go to mypillow.com, click on the 4-pack special, and enter promo code REAL, or call 1-800-943-4615. But don't forget, you got to use promo code REAL.
Welcome to Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You, the podcast that focuses on Christians that are active in everyday life. Join in as we speak to everyone from successful business owners to educators to athletes about their faith and how it helps them reach out and revolutionize those around them to do the same. And now get ready to roar with your host, the voice of manifestation, John Fuller.
Hey, Roar Nation, John Fuller here, and I am fired up for today's episode. So for those of you who do not know, I am bringing on a special guest, a dear friend of mine who's very prophetic, who I feel like is just making a massive impact in, if we want to call it the church world. I don't know what we want to call it. But anyways, we spoke several episodes ago, a long time ago. I had to look back. It was episode 43. For those of you, it has been a while. And for those of you who don't know, well, let me introduce real quick. But it's going to be my brother, Brad McClendon. Brad, you ready to rock this thing, man?
I'm ready. Ready whenever you are, buddy.
Ready whenever. Okay, so Roar Nation, if you go back to episode 43, what I love about Brad is if you have a hard time with the supernatural, I think a lot of people have never experienced it, or maybe even have some questions, maybe a lot of speculation or doubt. I love Brad. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it Living Vine International or Living Vine Ministries?
Either one. Yeah.
Okay.
Living Vine International Ministries or Living Vine Ministries.
Okay.
You can probably find us on the internet.
Oh yeah, I've Googled you. You can. We can find you. So Roar Nation, go back, check out what Brad is doing. The reason I tell you that, if you go back to episode 43, Brad's stories, he does, what do you call them? God stories? God
stories. Yeah.
And when do you do those? I know it's once a week.
Yeah, we do them every Tuesday at 9:00. It is 9:00 Eastern time, but it has shifted from being on Facebook to on our website. Now it's a webinar that you can sign up for, because everybody's wanted to kind of go deeper. So we do a webinar that goes a little bit deeper than just a 30-minute, type show. And it's been incredible.
Okay. So Roar Nation, check that out. It's really fun. And the reason I'm telling you that is Brad has some of the most crazy stories. And and I love them, man, because they really challenge you, because you'll walk away thinking, did that really happen? Can God show up in my life? And I think when you hear other people's testimonies and stories, it stirs up in your spirit. And for me, I think if God can do that for Brad, he can do it for me. And he's going to show up somehow, maybe not the same way, but he's going to show up somehow in my life. And it stirred me to just even more go after the Father to see what God's going to do. So I bet you got a lot of good stories on testimonies from stuff from that, Brad.
Oh my Lord. Yeah. I've had things that's happened to me. Most of these stories that I share, even on the God stories, or even if I shared some stories, this past weekend, to some of the folks there, but most of the stories are just as surprising to me as it is with, sharing it, because, when the supernatural of God power hits you, or even when God shows up, he's supernatural. So his mind is not near like us. So when his experience comes to you, it's the way he's thinking as well. We don't realize that, but normally when someone comes to you, you're not just encountering, the person, but you're having to encounter the mentality that they're in and everything. And with God, when he shows up, his mentality is not near like us. And so it really causes the carnal mind to start manifesting against it because it doesn't line up with our ways. And that's what's about to happen to us again as a Christian world.
Yes. Okay. So I said before the show started, and this is part of the reason I want our listeners, I hope this stirs something up. So several years ago, I really felt a stir, and I wrote down in my journal that the Lord spoke to me and said that the face of the church, what we know is the American church today, was radically going to shift, and there was going to be a huge change. I have no idea what that looks like. I've spoken a little bit about it in the past, but as I talk to other people, I've recognized that people are feeling that and sensing that as well. What I'm excited about that is I feel like you're kind of on the cusp of that, of really changing that and doing some things differently. So, Brad, what do you see, or what is like kind of stirring in you with that?
Well, that's a big question, but the whole the frustrative part of what's coming is that we want an image, and we're not going to get one. That's the whole key. I had a pastor, and I was telling him a little bit about where we're coming into, what we're coming into, and this whole thing of family. One of the errors that we have slipped into, according to God's design, is the era of family. And that started about 2 years ago. And he said, what does that look like? And I said, that's the problem, is that we're still trying to stamp it. We're still trying to make an image of it. You can look over, just the last few years, we've had several churches that really flourish and have a move of God. Then everybody tries to stamp it and make it look like it. But they say, well, we're not like so-and-so, but God's moving. We're just kind of taking a little bit what they're doing here, but we've kind of put our own little flavor with it. But it's everybody tries to make an image to attract attract the people, or it's just part of our nature to try to create an image of something. And God's not going to let that happen this time. He's going to create his image, which man is not going to be able to create out of human hands. And I'm kind of excited about that. I'm a little bit scared because you can't really control this next move of God and make it look like the Lord or make it look fluffy to attract people. And it's kind of going to be like, I would say, Matthew 17, when the disciples went up to the mount with Jesus. They had seen him, all of these years, the few years that they were with him. They followed him. They saw him in a certain image, and then he took them to a mountain, and his clothes, was whiter than snow, and then his face, which is his image, shone like the sun. Well, you can't create that. That's something that was created by God, that man can't create. And if you're looking at the sun and they're looking at his face and it was like the sun, that means you couldn't even see the outline of his face. It was bright. It was so bright. So we're about to see a God to where there's no outline of face. In other words, we can't outline what he's doing. And it's going to be so great. It's going to cause us to bend our knee again and really homage him as he is. Because if you remember, Peter tried to build something of a memorial for that image. And man, you can see Papa telling him to stop and just listen to my son. In other words, you can't build any kind of memorials to this thing. It's not going to look like my son. It's not going to look like me. And he said, just listen to him. And I think that's the era one of the dimensions of the eras that we're coming into. We've got to get back to really listening to Jesus instead of creating our own image.
So you answered my question, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. As far as, so pastors or people that are out there that are feeling that move, but necessarily don't know what that looks like, but they also know what they're doing isn't working. So a lot of times, So a lot of times what I see is I can't tell you how many churches I've seen in areas that we're in are like a mock version of a big church that like they're trying to imitate what they do because the church has blown up, and they do, I guess in people's eyes, they do a good version of quote church, at least the outward appearance of it. So they try to make a little mini version of it because they think it's going to work for them because they want to grow their church. But would you kind of just dive into like the problem with that and what God's doing? Because I think so many times what I'm thinking of is Moses, when he leaves to go seek God's face, Aaron sits there and makes a golden calf and screws the whole deal up. And that's kind of what I think of.
Yeah, the one of the reasons why he made that, he had the pressure of the people. The pressure of the people caused his mentality to change from being Godward to actually being people, and putting his mind on the cares of man instead of the mind of God. That was the first dimension of it. And when you do that, you end up creating things that man wants you to create instead of what God wants you to create. And that's basically sin. You fall under the expectations of the people instead of the will of the Lord. And listen, I was telling the pastor this weekend, he said, we were talking about this thing, family. He said, what does it look like? I said, that's the problem. It's not going to look like anything. And he goes, my God, we're going to have to lose our control. And I said, that's exactly right. The first thing that needs to be delivered or the people that need to be delivered is the leaders, because we have a mentality that actually sounds like wisdom, that we've got to do something for the people, which that sounds like a legit caring thought, but we put that first before our thoughts should be. We've got to listen to the Lord. And so we've been listening to the cares of the people, or what we need to do for the people, instead of listening to the Good Shepherd, which will give us the mentality of the Good Shepherd for the people. Then we end up doing the things of God instead of the things of what man wants us to do. And we're getting a lot of pastors that I've talked to are being frustrated. I talked to one not too long ago, said, we're doing miracles, we're doing signs, wonders, and all that stuff is great. He said, but something's missing. I mean, you really think about what he said, that's pretty radical.
Yeah, because a lot of churches don't even have that.
Right. Or if you think about it, his mentality of his church has been around signs, wonders, and miracles, and it hasn't been around God. You got to think about that. It's been trying to form signs, wonders, and miracles, and thinking that's going to attract people to the church. Well, you can do that because the gifts of God are without repentance. So you can do miracles, you can do healings, but are you following the Lord? And so he said, why am I so frustrated? I said, because you've put your whole church around signs, wonders, and miracles instead of the Lord, and you left the Lord back in the field, and he's just standing there waiting for you to come back.
Yeah, we're focused on what he does and not him. We're focused on the gifts and not the gift giver.
Exactly. And I used to be the same way. There is a balance. There is a balance of loving the gifts of God, and I mean, it says to covet them, but it says to pursue love first. And so we've got to pursue God. We got to pursue God, and then the miracles. But really, in Corinthians 13 talks about that when that which is perfect comes, everything else is done away with. That means there's something so big that we're going to forget everything that was important in the ministry. I mean, that is going to be so wonderful there's not going to be such a burden on us as leaders, that the love of God is going to come in such a way we're going to fall in love again, and the people are going to start falling in love with Jesus instead of the church or the system of that church, which is going to be even lift a burden off the people, because really, if you really get down to it, we are so frustrated and something is missing, and the thing that's missing is Jesus.
Yeah.
And that sounds very radical, but I'm meaning the real person of Jesus. I mean, I can follow a lot of guys for what they do, but am I really following them for who they are as a person, not as a minister? Just like you, John, you know, we're close friends, I believe.
Yeah.
And we don't follow each other. We don't love each other because of the things that we do. We love each other just because who we are. And your name's John. My name's Brad. I love to hunt. You know, you like to do other things as well. And we both work out, and we love each other just for who we are. And and you can't put that in a bottle. You can't teach that. You have to experience it with one another. And I think that's what we're about to see. Not only experience the revelation of who Jesus is, but really experience one another in a deeper way.
So besides, I was thinking about what you did this summer, which I'm going to dive into real quick. There's another guy that I interviewed over in Dallas who literally took his church. It was thriving, starting to get what most would consider fairly big. And the Lord spoke to him and basically said they needed to split the church up. They only get together once a week, and they have formed divided up the church into groups where people just do family, and they just do intimate relationships, that their focus is no longer church. And, and he said, I lost a lot of people. It just, because it was so different and so out of the box for what people were used to, it took a major shift for them. And then at the same time, I was talking to you this summer, and you did something that I had never heard of that I thought was radically different. And I would love for you to talk about that, because we've never even got into I spoke to you 2 weeks before you did it, and then we never got into any of the things that happened after. So I would love to hear kind of why you did what you did, what moved you to do it, and then what happened.
Well, first of all, to do something like what we did was pretty risky, but I thought, what else do we have to lose? So I have nothing to lose except, you know, maybe God could show up and it actually be the Lord's, because, you know, most of the stuff you think you're doing for God, and you're all doing it in faith. In other words, you're hoping that God will show up, you know. And so we ended up doing a thing called the School of Life, and we had a lot of, you know, folks just want to come, but we narrowed it down. I think we ended up having, I think it was 18 people. I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, we had a lady from UK come. We had a pastor and his wife come, and some other leaders from his church or his hubs that he had formed, and different people in Georgia, all around. And when they got here, they were expecting there to be training. And you got to understand, us putting this on as well, you feel the pressure also to actually have a format for training. And but I did set a schedule. Everybody had a schedule. Everybody had a calendar on what we were going to be doing. But everyone showed up to these meetings expecting there to be a training. And there was a training of actually loving one another. And when they first showed up, the day that they showed up, I told them, we're all going to the mountains. I rented a cabin up in the mountains of North Carolina, and we all stayed in a cabin together. And I invited another friend of mine named Randy Strombeck over, because he kind of has the same heart as we do. everybody unpacked their bags and so forth. And then when it came time to sit down, we all met in the den, and the den was just full of people. And the first thing I said, well, this is the training. And you could have heard a pin drop. And I said, the training is going to be us just getting to know one another, because we've been so busy on trying to get trained that we could actually learn more and have more knowledge of a revelation of the Lord if we could actually get to know one another.
Okay, dive into that, because that's a really good thing that you said. We'd get more revelation of God by knowing one another.
Yeah, that's the key to all revelation, really, is if you really start getting to know the person Jesus, how he moves, how he has his being, what he's thinking. When you start really getting into what makes him tick, how are you feeling today? I mean, who would have ever thought that you could ask God, how are you feeling today? Which I'm sure most ministers don't think that. They'll probably get in there. Most of your leaders and most of your people will get in their prayer closet, and their time alone with God, and they forget to ask him how he's doing. And the scripture does say, ask and you shall receive, but we forget that we're talking to a person. It's almost like God for centuries has been a machine that you pull the lever and he pops out answers for you that you want. And so you never get to know the machine itself that's popping out the answers. If he was a machine, I would be taking it apart and seeing how it actually works, because the words and the wisdom that's coming out of that machine has just been incredible. So I want to know how that thing actually works inside. And if I can know how it works inside, I can even gain more of this person that I'm with. And but I haven't done. I didn't do that for years. I was just like everybody else. But
how did that change? How did that change for you, though, Brad? What was the mind shift? Because obviously it's radically changed your ministry, the way you walk with the Lord. I mean, what I love about you. I can tell you.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say real quick, what our listeners aren't going to know about you that I know is you really don't give a crap in the sense of ministry. And what I mean by that, I want to be really careful, is you love God, you love people, but you really don't care if your name was on something, or if people knew who you were, or if you show up and there's 1,000 people conference, or like, that's what I love about you. Cause you don't care. You're just like, I'm just here for relationship and people. And it's a different mindset than what most people see in the church, because so many people are driven by numbers and you're driven by relationship. And I love that about you. So I want to honor you in that, but I want to know, though, like where that mind shift came from, because it's totally different than what most people are used to.
Well, I mean, it has to go back. I mean, it's a God story, honestly. It has to go back to 2000. I think it was 2008 or 2009. I mean, years before that, in the 90s, I had some major experiences with the Lord. And it did turn my heart to this place of wanting to know him. But just like anybody else, the world and the pressure of the world, without me knowing, slid me out of that wanting to be intimate with God to really doing the ministry, kicking into a ministry mode. I call it kicking into a ministry mode. And I realized if I'm having to kick into a ministry mode and love people, to allow the gifts to flow and all that stuff to go, to come out, to prophesy and all of that. And then after it's over, I end up being Brad. Something's wrong. I can walk off the stage and I kick into ministry mode, and I find myself loving the people, but then I go home and I'm a different person. Then something's completely wrong. I should be the same person as I am at home with the people out on, when I walk up on the stage. And I didn't realize that it actually happened through the course of my ministry. And in 2000, after years of being in ministry, in 2008 or 9, I was sitting at my desk, and a literal cloud came down out of the ceiling, and it was Father himself, and scared me to death. And an audible voice said, it felt as though he was concerned and almost sad. And he said, Brad, he said, will you give my son's reputation back on the earth? He's almost lost it. And when he said that, I had these visions of the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up till now. And I got to see a revelation on how even the church has left the importance of finding the person Jesus throughout those ages. And I watched how that serpent took that away to actually us either creating presence or creating ministry, but not showing the people Jesus. And that sounds very radical, but I can tell you why I understood it is because where the vision stopped was on me in this vision. And I had to watch myself in this. I was actually teaching at this conference. It was called a healing conference, learning how to heal people, which is now with me, even saying that makes me want to throw up because the name Jesus wasn't even in the title.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching myself teach these people on healing. And I remember I'll never forget, there's 3,000 people there. And I'm teaching them on healing. I'm teaching them all the principles of the kingdom to walk in healing. And I watched myself get down off the stage. And I remember this, tons of people got healed, and everybody started crowding around me, wanting me to touch them and get them healed and so forth. And people were flying in the air. I had one person fly in the air about 10 feet and land and like 2 rows back. And all these people around me, and I'm watching this in the vision, and guess who's on the other side of the room? Jesus. So the whole crowd had gathered around what I had taught. Instead of, I should have taught about the Lord so that they could gather around him. And when I saw this, I realized I was headed to be a leader on this earth that did many miracles, had a huge ministry, did signs and wonders, but didn't know him. I would have been the very one to say, hey, I cast out demons in your name, did mighty miracles in your name. And he would have said to me, I do not know you. I'm sorry. We didn't get to have koinonia with each other. You didn't have a relationship with me. You used my stuff, but you never came into my house to sit and get to know me. And so that changed me when I came out of that and saw that vision of where I was headed. Because without knowing, I was subconsciously taking away the reputation of Jesus and putting it either on ministry or myself or our ministry. And it's a sly snake that works in that thing. And so I started repenting. I said, Lord, I have basically walked away from you. Please get me back. Please start reminding me of your teachings of your son, not the teachings of ministry. And he started taking me down that road and started giving me back the revelations of his son. And that caused a hunger in me and you say, you said those words, you don't really care about all that. And honestly, I really don't. It's not that I don't care like in a rebellious way. I don't have a care to be anything because he's everything. And you do get to a point where, like Paul says, you end up hating this life. You end up hating your own life because you want to be with him so much. You get to a point where you don't even like your own cares. Your own needs don't even mean nothing compared to what you've been seeing. And you'd rather just be with him. And that's, honestly, I mean, if it was up to me, I'd probably be up in a cabin somewhere, sitting in a cabin up in the mountain somewhere, talking to him and journaling and writing down everything he shows me about him. Not about his ministry, but about him. And everybody, I can tell you from since those years, since that happened in 2008, I've been sharing things about Jesus, and I've watched kids today. I mean, this weekend, the kids came in the sanctuary because I was telling a story about Jesus and who he was. And that tells me something, because the Lord told me a long time ago, if kids can't understand what you're saying, you have actually gone way off. While I was there at the church, kids were wanting to stay in church and listen to who Jesus is. And see, our spirit wants to know God. It wants to know the person intimately. And when you start sharing intimate things about the person Jesus, every spirit comes into alignment with him. That's and good. Things start to change in the body even. They don't realize it, but things start to change in the body, and things fall off that they've been in prayer with for centuries. Maybe have gone in healing lines, to get healed. Well, a lot of times the reason they're not getting healed is because they're thinking, if I get into a healing line, I'll get healed. Well, they need to think about, if I can just touch Jesus, I'll get healed. Yeah. And it's a different way of thinking. You go from formulated thinking to person thinking. And you get close to him, he'll mess you up.
So
he really will.
I want to go back to the school of life, though, because what we haven't dived into is for like what it looked like, the overall. If I'm not mistaken, I think you guys did community together. All these people came together for like a month or something.
Yeah, a whole month. Absolutely. Okay. It started that way when we went up to the cabin, and I said, all right, we're going to get open and tell us who you are. And I said, I'm not going to teach you this month. We're going to let the Lord teach us. But as we're together, the Lord will show up as we find ourselves really opening up with each other and learning who we are with each other. Well, a lot of them I would call manifested, because they were wanting to come and gather a lot of knowledge to take back to the church or take back to wherever they're living and be able to, change so-called people. But that didn't happen. We ended up just coming together. And, the first time when I said that, the pastor's wife just immediately just said, okay, well then if it's going to be like this. And, she just opened up about her life, and then opened up really raw about her marriage. Yeah. And you could have heard a pin. You could have heard a pin drop. But here's the thing. That was a lesson. As soon as she opened up about her marriage and some of the areas that has not been good because of ministry, you feel that, you feel the air tighten up, right? And, everybody's like, oh God, she's been, this is wrong. This is embarrassing. And so I would stop her in the middle of it. I go, okay, hold on just a sec. Here's a life lesson right here. Does everybody feel like this is embarrassing, that we shouldn't be talking about this because this is a meeting, this is an event that we're doing. This is school. And I said, no, this is actually what we need to learn.
Yeah.
What you're feeling is not embarrassment and something wrong. You're actually feeling what really should be going on, but your mind has been taught that this is wrong when really this is right. And everybody went, oh my goodness, you're right. I said, if Jesus could take off his clothes, take off his robe, and bathe our feet, then every time, if we can take off our robes, maybe the Jesus Christ in us, if we could just get open, could it be if we got open, just like Jesus did, it would wash each other's feet?
That's good, man. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and so once this revelation came out, people just went nuts. Okay, I've got something. I've got.
Yeah.
I got.
Yeah, it was like it gave people permission to be them.
Yes.
It's like the enemy comes along and he condemns us and he makes us think like we can't talk about things like sex and marriage and relationships.
Yes.
And kids and honestly life, and we bottle it up, and then it's like when that happens, it's like we almost need somebody to give us permission to say, hey, it's okay to have a bunch of crap in your closet. Let's just clean it out.
That's exactly right. Now, you just said the key to this thing. Someone's got to be in that place of maturity and in love with Jesus so much that they're not offended with what people say. They're not in this event thing. You're not in an event thinking. If I was in an event thinking, then I would think she's ruining my event. And so I've got to turn it in some way to get it back on track when it was on track to start with. Isn't that strange? And so what I was doing is I was just being the mediator to explain really what was happening and put Jesus in the midst of really what was happening that everybody thought was wrong. And so I put a Jesus scene in what was happening. Then the power of God shows up, and then everybody starts getting washed. And then once they realized, hey, this is Jesus, then everybody started opening up, kind of like Peter. Well, my God, if I'm not going to be any part of you, if you can, he said, if I don't wash you, you're not a part of me, basically. And so Peter just said, well, just wash the whole thing.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly what happened. When I explained it, I go, hold on just a second, guys. This is what you think. What you're feeling is this. And so I described how Jesus washed the feet, how he disrobed. And when I did that, they were just like Peter. Okay, well, then here's my stuff. And so everybody took off their clothes. In other words, they disrobed from their event thinking to actually being real. And now Jesus can move and have his being among his family, because that's what he's looking for, his family.
Yeah, Jesus can't fix something that we don't expose. He knows it's there, but
you can't
expose it. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. So, and that's the way the church started. See, I mean, when the church started, if we were there, we would have been as offended as everybody else. In Acts 2, the Holy Spirit shows up, and the boys end up being something that doesn't line up with event thinking. They end up speaking all these different languages, and then people are going, this is weird. This isn't the Lord. What's going on there? They must be drunk. So a mediator, which is Peter, has to get up and explain to them a God story that has already taken place. And when he does it, it brings understanding to everybody, and then it bursts the church. And so we've got to have that place to where when people start opening up, to be able to be the mediator led by the Holy Ghost to show them, hey, wait a minute, this is the Lord. This has already been done before. Let me show you in Scripture. And when you show it, and it's actually a reflection of the Lord, it causes things to be birthed that could have never been birthed unless there was a revelation of Jesus within it. That's huge.
No, it is, man, it's amazing. So I want to, as we kind of wrap up the show, I would love to hear a story. 'Cause I love your stories. You're so good at them, but just kind of an outcome of what happened with some of these people of you guys living. 'Cause I mean, that's serious. I mean, that's day one that everybody starts unloading their junk. I mean, you get 30 days of that. There had to be some serious people just getting delivered and really getting intimate with the Father.
Oh yeah, they getting intimate and getting pissed off. Excuse the pun.
Yeah.
Because some of them we go, hey, we're going to the beach. What are we doing and they'd email me or text me, what are we doing at the beach? We're going, and I text, we're going to the beach.
Like, there's nothing spiritual about it. We're just going.
Because that's exactly right. See, we're always wanting to know ahead of time what kind of function it is, so that then we can feel safe. And God's not like that. He's just not like that. And there was one particular moment. I can tell you, I wish he was on the phone with me. Maybe you can interview him, because he's the pastor that came.
Yeah.
He would tell you exactly through his own words, but his name's Scott Neri. He's a great guy, wonderful friend now. And after a few days of this thing, we would meet, and we got this room in the back of the church that me and Mark Twain and Stephen Alls built. It literally looks like a living room, and we'd meet back there and just hang out with each other. And these types of settings would end up occurring, and that happened in the cabin. And finally, the pastor, Scott, he comes in. He's still hoping that there'll be training, right? And so he goes, well, what are we doing today? And I go, I'm going to turn on some music. We're just going to meditate and just hang out with the Lord. Are you serious? Are you serious? Yes. We're just going to. So you're not going to give us anything? No. We're just going to hang out together and just meditate on the Lord. If you want to lay down on the floor and or if you want to, walk around, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you throw up, but we're just going to hang out. And so we ended up, I just turned on some music. We just hung out. Man, the Lord showed up. Nobody was moving. And after about 2 hours, now think about this, a leader having to be still for 2 hours. That's tough. So he just says, okay, I've got to say this. I'm about to throw up. I said, what is it? He said, dude, that's what he said. He said, dude, I got taken somewhere and I don't like it about me. And he was serious. I thought, man, he has really encountered something. He said, I'm embarrassed to tell everybody this because this has really been who I am. I said, what is it, man? He said, I got taken to a theater and I was on the stage doing my gifts and doing all my preaching and all the prophecies and stuff. And I looked out in the audience and they were all just eating popcorn, watching the show. And he just started crying. He said, I've been doing this all my life, Brad. He said, it's not just in ministry. I was trained this way, that you've got to be the show. You've got to be the one that draws the people in. And he said, honestly, I've been miserable, but I've just covered that voice up and just chose to be the show. And I get a lot of adrenaline out of it, but it's not the Lord. I want to know him. I'm tired of giving people popcorn. That just really doesn't last. And man, I'm going to tell you what, you could have heard a pin drop. I thought, that's the reason why we're here right there. He's finally coming to himself. And that's what happened with all of us. We finally came to ourselves in order to be able to see not only God, but to be able to see one another as well. And we all became family. Matter of fact, while I'm sitting here, I just got a text from one of them in the school. Literally, one of the students that was in the school. She's about 52, maybe 51. She got wrecked herself. Just amazing. That's the kind of intimacy. God just doesn't want us to have intimacy with him, but that same intimacy that we have with him is going to be between one another. Can you imagine what that's going to do?
That's powerful.
So we're headed toward being real family, and church is not going to even look like church anymore. It's going to look like family.
I love that.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of things in that, you can talk about in that thing, but that was probably the most intimate moment for Scott in his life, and he's still changing. He's having to. Matter of fact, I'm going down to New Orleans. He's bringing all these leaders there, and he's wanting me to talk to them. He said, I can't put into words what's happened, but maybe if you're there with me, we could share what's going on. Because he said, you really can't market this. You can't make it an event. You can't make it an image, but maybe the Lord would just show up in the intimacy that we've got with one another.
Okay,
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. So if I'm a listener, Brad, I'm listening to this saying, okay, that's great. Love your story. Love what happened for you guys, but that's not happening in my life, or that's not happening in my church. Like, what would you tell people that are just listening? Because like, I can't, for some of us, we can't fly to Carolina and hang out for a month or do that. Like, what would you tell the rest of us to do that are saying, yes, I want more of that because I'm sick of just quote unquote the way church is doing. I need more. What's that step, and what does that look like?
Man, that's extreme, because I've had pastors actually ask me that, because it's a hard thing, because ministry's gotten so addicting. It's more like a drug now. Trying to get away from the pressure of having to keep things going. But I can tell you, I think it's Matthew 4. I think it starts in 18 to 21. Here comes Jesus calling his family, and he's come to the Sea of Galilee. Peter's there, and Andrew's brother. They're casting the net. So they're working their heads off. That would be people that have been following the Lord, knowing how to cast the net, do the whole ministry thing, bringing in people, drawing them in, using certain tools to get them in. And here comes Jesus. They're worn out of casting nets, and he says, follow me. And it says immediately they left their nets. Nets there, to me, prophetically means the way that you think, your network of thinking, the way you thought you should bring in the people, casting your nets. All of that's got to end. So I would say you've got to drop your nets and start getting back with him and following him. Even if it takes you shutting down the business or the ministry that you're doing, because it's really wearing you out anyway from the pressure of the people. And you have to keep the adrenaline going just so that you can bypass the little voice that tells you you're dying.
Oh, wow.
And then then he goes again to the sons, to the other brothers, James and John, and I think in verse 21, and it says they're mending their nets. So you've got one group that's casting, you got another group that's mending. And so that's another pressure of us. There's always something that we've been mending in our ministry. There's always something that we've got to fix, and we could make it better. But I don't know if anybody's a fisherman out there, when you mend a net, it is so frustrating. And the problem is that the revelation in mending your nets means what you have is always going to be tearing if it's not from the Lord. And so you're always trying to mend something. You're always trying to fill in the gaps of the ministry. We got this missing. We got to have someone to fill in this. We got to have someone to fill in that. Pray that God sends somebody to fill in this position. Well, those positions that are actually falling apart are actually positions you don't need if you keep trying to mend it. So you have to drop those nets and follow him. It's an extreme thing, but there's major deliverance for us, but we have to drop the things that have really been killing us and wearing us out in order to get back to the intimacy of knowing Jesus, because I'm telling you, the intimacy in the person Jesus is the huge dragnet that's going to bring in the world.
Mm-hmm. Love it, man. Man, Brad, thank you so much for sharing. I wanted, this is totally a different edition as far as things that we do on our show, but it had been stirring so much inside of me. And every time we have a conversation, man, I just know that's who you are, and I feel it. And I just thought, man, our audience I think people need it because they're hungry for it. And even if they don't even realize it, they want it. Because I think once you hear it, like, you don't even know you want it. And then you start to hear it and you're like, yes. Like, I want something different. I don't know what different looks like, but I want different. And that different is that intimacy with Jesus.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. One thing I can tell you, anytime I go to a church, I don't look how many people there are. This will help a lot of guys out there. I look for the character of Christ. Is Christ being formed in people, not ministry? Because if Christ be formed in us, ministry is automatic. But if we're trying to put ministry first before the character of Christ, then we're going to miss the foundation of why he really came. And so it doesn't matter if you've got 12, because Jesus ended up having 12, but those 12 ended up having the character and the nature of Christ Jesus, that turned the world upside down. Why in the world being turned upside down? Again, it's because we've missed the foundation, which is Christ. We've put the ministry first instead of forming Christ in us. And it doesn't matter if you've got 12, it doesn't matter if you've got 50, and you may have 3,000, but it is the character of Christ being formed in the people. That is what he's looking for. Because I want him to be able to come to people that I've led and helped in life and be able to look at them and they be his mirror. They reflect to him his image because they've been looking at him so long.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Brad, where, for those that are excited, maybe stirred, I hope, after listening to this, where do we find kind of like your website, some of the stuff that you're doing, talking about your God stories, or maybe if, we're in the vicinity of a church that you're speaking at or something?
Yeah, you can get on livingvineministries.org, or they can go to the Living Vine Ministries Facebook. But we've always have something going on there. Of course, I don't do it, thank God. I used to do it, but I don't do it anymore. But they can be able to, even with the webinar, if they got on the webinar, it's like, I think we charge $10 a month. That's just paying for the webinar, and then get on all the archives, the God stories, and all that stuff. And we're on there live every Tuesday, and they can know where we are. Our schedule's on there, our calendar and everything's on there as well. And they can write in from there as well.
All right, man. Well, Brad,
buddy.
I'm going to leave you with the last, you've poured out a ton. If you got anything left to say, or if you just want to give a piece of parting advice, man, the mic is yours.
Yeah, I just pray, like I said, for everybody that's listening, drop anything that's wearing you out. It's not from the Lord. And get back with Jesus. Go after the Lord. Because in the end, that's all it's going to be about. It's going to be about Jesus. It's not going to be about what we've done. So just seek him with all your heart. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. And then you'll love the world. You'll love the people you come in contact with all your heart. And everything you do in life will be at a place of rest if you're following the Lord. So just seek him first. Everything else will be added.
Amen. All right, Brad, hold on just a second as we wrap up the show. Roar Nation, I hope, man, that inspired you. That is just maybe your head's turning and you're thinking, man, I just don't know about this. And I love those moments because I can think back through my walk with the Lord the last 20 years that every time I had a moment where I just wasn't sure, that it was just challenging the way that I thought, but it felt good in my spirit. I just know the Lord radically showed up, and it was defining moments all throughout my life when I had those moments. So I just challenge you today. I ask that you would write into us. You can go on our website or get on our Facebook page and message either Casey, my wife, or myself. And I want to hear your stories. I want to hear what God's doing. I want to hear about the intimacy and how you're pursuing God and what's changing in your life. Because I'm just telling you right now, as we pursue Jesus, radical things change in our marriage, our kids, work, business, relationships. It just happens. It's an overflow of what you're getting, and it just comes out of us. So I love you guys. I can't wait to hear your stories. Please get on iTunes, rate and review us. It helps us get the message out there. And and I'm asking you right now, if you would take the time to share this podcast with one or two people, just send it to them as a text message and say, you need to hear this. So love y'all. Have a great day. Remember, be real, be authentic, and be you. God bless.
That's all for this episode of Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You. Be sure to go to areyoureal.org for your free questionnaire to identify your gifts and talents and how you can use them to help people become leaders and catapult them into their destiny to help others become the leaders of tomorrow. We appreciate you spending your time with us and look forward to helping you reach out and revolutionize next time on Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You.